Hello, welcome to our video titled Let's Talk About Eating Disorders, a personal experience from Beth. Welcome, Beth. Thank you for coming today. Did you want to give a brief introduction to yourself and why you are here today and a little bit about your eating disorder experience, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Beth. I had an eating disorder from the years of around 2018 to 2020, and now completely fully recovered and really happy.
Oh, that's really good to hear. So what was your experience of an eating disorder then? Can you talk us through it?
Sure. So it kind of started when my partner at the time really wanted to move to London. And I was really hesitant. I was from a little village. London life wasn't for me, and it never had been. But I felt obliged, and actually, I struggled a lot then with anxiety and sticking up for myself. So I kind of went along with it, pretending that I was okay, and actually wasn't really okay with that. And then I got a job in London and ended up walking 3 miles to work, 3 miles back, and then going out on my lunch and around for meetings, going around London all the time, and actually just wasn't fueling myself. So it wasn't really an obvious thing. I just didn't even ever consider the fact that I would have had to eat a lot more because I was walking to and from work. And in the end, the weight started plummeting. And obviously, your mindset changed. And with the Minnesota study, it kind of shows that your mindset has changed so much that actually I ended up having those eating disorder mannerisms, then kind of not restricting my food as such, but not realizing that I needed to eat more. And then over exercising more. I started exercising in the mornings, as well as, doing all the walks and relying on that to kind of take away the pain that I was kind of struggling because I didn't want to be in London. And it was kind of a way to escape that reality. So that's kind of where it kind of stemmed from.
Thank you. So you said briefly about the Minnesota study. Do you mind just saying what that is for those who don't know?
Sure. So that is basically where they had a lot of participants, and they restricted their food intake, and to see how their mindset or what would happen when they restricted their food intake. A lot of the men, I think it was all men, had a complete change in their attitudes, in their mentality. They were fascinated by food, so they were always looking at videos. They were hoarding their food. They were turned quite angry and frustrated, and actually just completely changed their personality.
Yeah, that really shows that an impact that food has on an individual. Thank you. Did you have any preconceptions about what an eating disorder was or what mental illness looked like before you yourself developed one?
Yeah, it was weird actually for me. And even though I could see or I could notice the weight dropping off me, and when I went home, my mum was obviously in shock that the weight had dropped off, but I still didn't actually realise that there was anything wrong, because in my head, an eating disorder was someone who really didn't want to eat, wanted to be thin, wanted to lose weight, and actually, I think I'm here because I want to get rid of that stigma, and actually that kind of mentality that so many people have. And I know myself, I definitely had it before. The mentality that, that's a drive to be thin, and those people want to be like that. It is the complete opposite. It really is.
We'll come on to stigma and stereotypes in a bit. So you briefly mentioned about, not really realising that you were unwell, or considering yourself to be unwell. What was it that kind of clicked for you to make you think, actually, this is possibly, damaging, or you are unwell?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to the doctor a lot. My mum dragged me there. And at first they didn't seem concerned. They told me that exercise was great for suffering with anxiety. So obviously that fed those kind of those thoughts. And then it kind of got to the point where I was sat having an ECG, and they realised that my heart rate was so at a rate of under 40, which I think they admit to hospital under 40. And I think I was just on the cusp. And then they did all the other tests, blood pressure, etc. And I just missed out on being admitted to hospital. And I think that's when it struck in my head that I was really unwell and needed to seek help. But until then, I was so, I guess, switched off from it. I just didn't want to. Maybe I knew I'd lost a lot of weight. I knew I had. I could visually see that I didn't like what my body looked like, but I just didn't think that an eating disorder would happen to me, and it couldn't be that.
It's really tough, isn't it, to think you kind of minimalize what you're feeling, to make it normal. Okay. So what helped you during the illness to feel better, and what helps you now in your recovery?
So at the start, I was on a long waiting list, actually. And so even though I was high priority and got seen quite quickly to start with, then to actually get the treatment, I had a long wait. And in that time, I found comfort in looking at things online of recovery stories, listening to podcasts, and people that had kind of got over it and come out the other side. Then on the same kind of thread, having the therapy, I had a psychologist that I ended up paying for privately on the side, but I also had a therapist with the NHS once I got seen, and that was paramount to my recovery. However, I still was very reluctant to take medication. I still had that stigma against medication, and funnily enough, my brain was just overworking with all the anxious and on edge thoughts I had, and I needed medication to actually see the wood for the trees and be able to think rationally, because I think that's what the eating disorder did. It just took away all my rational thoughts. And then as soon as I took the medication, my weight started increasing, and then I felt a more able to recover and learn, learn through the therapy of what I actually needed to do to recover. And my mindset did change as my weight increased.
Did you experience any stigma or stereotypes at all?
So I think for me, I am always someone who pretends I'm absolutely fine. I think that's probably why I ended up in the position that I was, because I wanted to please everyone else and I just wanted everyone to think I was fine. I think my closest friends and definitely my family knew that I was not well. And I had a few comments from elderly relatives that, maybe aren't as aware and, just eat a bit more and things that, those comments, that is all the stigma towards losing weight and eating disorders. Everyone thinks it's okay to just eat more, like that's so easy, and I hadn't thought of that myself. It's just not, it's not like that. There's so many mixed emotions, and your brain is telling you so many different things, and it's so hard to find the ability to overcome that just by eating more, because actually my brain was saying that I was a burden, that I was horrible, that and all these things, that hearing people like relatives saying, oh, just eat a bit more, like rubbing it off as it's nothing, actually hurts a lot more, because you're fighting so many battles that no one realizes that your brain is running a million miles an hour. But as such, I try to hide it from friends and a lot. I think a few of them did know and didn't necessarily say anything. I think maybe that's not ideal either. I wish someone had, but I didn't have anyone that I could really talk to about it, because I didn't know anyone who'd gone through it, or that anyone I felt like I could openly say that I was really struggling. I think people knew I was, but not necessarily I had the confidence to say that I had an eating disorder.
Yeah, that's it can be a really difficult thing, isn't it? Like having that conversation and not knowing and who to speak to about that, I'm sure is confusing in itself. So what are the kind of things that you could say to people that are potentially struggling now to help them start having a conversation around some experiences that they're having?
Yeah, I mean, from looking what I can say now, because I've never felt happier, and actually the strength that I've learned, like I hit rock bottom. I really did. It was a horrendous time, and I can't even begin to explain. And I feel so much sympathy for everyone who's going through it. However, now looking back, I've grown so much as a person. I've developed so much strength. You can recover, and you really can learn to have faith in yourself and courage that you will overcome this, and you aren't your eating disorder. You can recover fully, and live a really happy life. And yes, there'll always be those little niggles in your brain. Everyone has them, but you are an individual and you're worthy of treatment. And I think at that point where I hit rock bottom, when I was sitting in that doctor's room, getting told that I might be going to hospital, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. I really realized then that actually, that, this isn't the life I want to live. I don't want to be constantly feeling like I was a burden to my family. And I know that they're all things that people think of when you're in that position, but those thoughts and feelings will diminish, and you can live a completely happy life post recovery, and it can happen to you.
Thank you. So you've mentioned a few times about feeling a burden. How did you cope with any sense of guilt or blame or shame that comes attached to illnesses like eating disorders?
Yeah, I I felt I felt like a complete like burden, like I was saying, to my family most of the time. My mum was probably my biggest support, and she was always there to listen. And I just realized how much, it was putting on my family, and I could see everyone was worried about me and not understanding why I was, feeling the way I did, and no one could help as such. And I think that, you know, you I felt ashamed because I didn't understand how I'd put my family through this. Um, but I think it's that position where you end up having to kind of take a step back, and that's that rational thinking, where when I had medication, I could suddenly feel, I was like, hang on a minute, my brain is telling me all these things that my family think I'm a horrible person, etc., etc. But actually I could think, hang on a minute, no, I'm not. And you can kind of see that shame I put on myself, and it was all self-inflicted. I don't think anyone ever said to me that I was a letdown or anything like that. I know that they didn't. It was all like in my head and my thoughts than actually what was going on in reality. I just couldn't see the reality at the time.
Yeah, eating disorders have a habit of kind of clouding the reality. So did you feel like this was a different entity, the eating disorder?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny though, because at the time I thought I had changed, and that was me for good. This frail, timid, constantly, miserable and feeling like a failure person was me completely, and that was going to be me for good, and that was my mindset. And I'd lost me. I had completely lost who I was. And actually, I think that started quite a long way before, even like acknowledging the eating disorder, moving to London and things. I hadn't ever considered that was something that I'd want to do. But I went along with it, and I was pretending to be this person that was constantly happy and fine to do those things. And that had completely changed me at that point. And then it just continually downturned. So over the years, it just felt like that was just me in a natural position, rather than actually who I was and who I am now. And actually, it's kind of a full circle where I started as one thing moving into, the deepest, darkest time in my life, to actually being stronger than the person who was prior to the eating disorder, and being happier than that person as well. So I guess, it's every cloud. In a weird sense, I'm glad I went through it, because I have developed a lot of strength through it.
That's amazing to feel, that you're such a hard experience and circumstance and illness like that, you can look at that in a positive light. That's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So what could you kind of suggest to people, those that are struggling, or their families, if they're seeking help and they're not getting the response they want? What could you kind of suggest for them?
Yeah, I mean, that happened to me. I obviously went to the doctors. I got told to exercise first of all, which wasn't great when I was already completely over exercising. Then I got told to get a cat and a kitten to kind of distract my mind. But we kept on going back, and actually we learned that a few doctors in the surgery really knew what an eating disorder was. Others weren't so trained up, but you have to be persistent. And I mean, if it wasn't for my mum, I think I probably would have been like, oh, well, they aren't bothered. But if you are struggling, it's so necessary to keep on pushing for help, because actually, I think, it's so hard for that person to go to the doctors and actually sit in front of them and say their story and say what's wrong, and it takes so much courage, but it's worth it, because you will find that one doctor that will put you on that waiting list for treatment and will support you. And once I found that doctor, I felt so supported. And actually, she went away for 6 months on a secondment and came back, and she actually asked to see me, because I taught her a lot about what an eating disorder was, but also, she learned so much, and she wanted to have an appointment to see how I was doing. And so I think, you will find that person that you can go to and have an honest conversation. And the same with my therapist and my cognitive behavior therapist. She was incredible, and I create a really good bond with her. And I think, if you don't find that bond with someone, I'm sure you can request a change and find that someone that you can trust and put your faith in. Because I think that's part of the whole process. Having faith in someone and someone to listen to you. That it's not family, that's someone outside of that relationship that can give you honest advice, but also support you through the whole process of recovery.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well that you made about, if one person doesn't seem to get it, you can ask for someone else. It's the same for therapists, like you said, not everyone gets it right first time, and it doesn't necessarily click. So you can ask for another person, or you can go back again. It might just be, say, if it's like you're speaking to a friend or family member, they just don't understand it at that time, but they may come back to that.
Yeah, exactly. And they can learn themselves. And, they don't get a lot of training on this, if not any. So, I think that's part of our whole process of creating a leaflet as well, to help doctors and nurses and those practitioners to actually learn the insides of it, and rather than what you see in the media, and actually from people themselves, what they've gone through.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much power in, sharing your lived experience, isn't there? There is a misconception that it's called an eating disorder. People just think it's about food, but quite often, and not always, but quite often it is about control. Did you experience this at all, and can you relate to that?
Yeah, 100%. It was all control for me, control of the exercise that I could literally just do, and it gave me that serotonin boost. That's what I was looking for completely, just that like release. And I think, it was a way to control everything that I was so unhappy in where I was. And it was just the one thing that was keeping me sane as such. and a way to control it. And I think as the weight dropped off me and my mindset changed, then it became slightly about the food side, but not necessarily that I was restricting my food, just that I wasn't putting in the food that I actually needed. But it was mostly the control around the exercise, and that I needed to do it. I was, I had all these thoughts that if I didn't, bad things would happen, or it was such a compulsion to do it, and to do it for long enough and punish myself, as a way of control.
Yeah, and like you said, obviously food is something you put in your body and something you can control. So although it's not about food, food does play a part. So that is a key point. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, is there anything, looking back on, when you were unwell, that you would like to say to yourself or to say to someone that is struggling at the moment?
Sure. So me and my mum sat on the sofa when I was in such a bad headspace, and my mum said to me, she said, this will be the making of you, that you will be able to help someone, one person, even just one person, you'll be able to help. And I didn't believe that at the time, and I thought that my life was just over and going to be this hellhole. But actually, I have learned that I've been able to help other people. I've been able to speak up about my eating disorder, being able to be open and honest about it, being able to help other people who are struggling with other mental health issues, not just eating disorders. And I think I've become someone that a lot of my friends can trust to speak to. And I think I never would have ever thought that I would have the courage to do that. But I have. And so I wish I could tell myself then that to believe my mum and to believe that I can get over it and I can be the strong person that I am now, because I wouldn't have believed it at the time.
Yeah. So thinking about your recovery then, are there things now that you can really enjoy, knowing that you've recovered and was worth recovering for?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing is just spending time with friends, and being able to kind of live freely without the addiction to exercise and the compulsion to do it every single morning, without fail, and those thoughts that if I didn't, something bad would happen. I don't have those anymore, and I can actually exercise for enjoyment, which is how I was prior to feeling like the need for exercising. And going out with friends has been a huge thing, and not looking at menus before, and feeling like I can enjoy myself. I am allowed to be happy, and I am allowed to do things that are nice. Getting cakes when I want. If I walk into a coffee shop and see cake now, I can enjoy it. I am deserving of it. Whereas at the time, I thought that those nice things weren't for me. Same with baking. I loved baking, but I never would allow myself to have it because I didn't deserve those nice things. So those like control elements of my life that were so heavily controlled and that I wasn't deserving of nice things have meant that I can actually buy a car, because I have been able to treat myself, even though for all those times I would never be able to put money on myself or pay for anything, go out with friends, etc. Because I wasn't deserving. But now I feel like I fully can, and I don't have those guilty feelings for doing so.
Absolutely. That's really good to hear that, you feel that you deserve those things, and everyone does deserve those treats, and to be kind to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else that you think is important to mention that we haven't spoken about already?
It's just to have faith in yourself, have courage in yourself. There are a lot of battles in recovery. There will be times that feel really tough, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are so many people who live and can tell the tale of being able to live a life without the negativity that an eating disorder brings. And you aren't your eating disorder. You've got to remember that there is a person inside you that is waiting to come out, and that person is the person you were before all of this. And it's something that I kept reminding myself a lot of throughout. And it's just, feel the fear of the things that scare you when you're in your eating disorder, or the things that you're told that you have to do, and do it anyway, do everything in opposites, really.
That's really good advice. Thank you, Beth. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story.
Thank you for watching our video. For more information on eating disorders and the support available, please check out the links that are on screen. These links are also going to be in the description box below. Thanks again.